It was our anniversary, and the house felt heavy with unspoken words. The kind of weight that's not immediately noticeable, but you can feel it in every room, every silence. Liam had been acting distant for weeks now, little things here and there that I noticed but tried to ignore. I told myself it was just stress, that he was going through something at work, or that maybe we were just going through a rough patch. But today, I couldn't push the nagging feeling away. He walked into the living room holding a small, carefully wrapped box. It wasn't the usual grand gesture I might have hoped for, but I wasn't expecting that anyway. Not after everything. Still, there was something in his eyes as he handed it to me that made my heart flutter in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. His smile was soft, hopeful even, as if this moment mattered to him more than it should. "Here," he said, his voice quiet. "Happy anniversary." I took the box from him, fingers brushing his for a second too long. There was a strange sort of warmth that spread through me, a faint sense of guilt maybe, for the way things had been between us. I should have been more excited. I should have smiled and thanked him for whatever he put so much thought into. But instead, I felt a knot in my stomach. Why was I so uneasy? I carefully unwrapped the gift, my heart racing for a moment. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a small wooden sculpture. It wasn't a grand thing, just a hand-carved figure of two birds perched on a branch. It looked like something you'd buy at a tourist shop, a cheap souvenir meant to be sentimental but lacking the real meaning behind it. The craftsmanship wasn't terrible, but it was underwhelming. And that's when it hit me, disappointment. I looked up at him, holding the sculpture in my hands, feeling my mouth go dry. The smile on his face faltered as he watched me, the silence hanging thick. "Really?" I said, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. "This is what you got me? After everything?" His smile vanished completely. For a second, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he would laugh it off, like he always did when I poked fun at his efforts. But the look on his face told me that wasn't going to happen this time. The warmth in his eyes disappeared, replaced by a flicker of something else. "Hurt." "Liam," I started, trying to backtrack. I didn't mean it but he didn't wait for me to finish. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I watched as he grabbed his coat from the back of the chair, not saying a word. The air in the room felt colder now. "I need some air," he muttered, his voice flat, as if he had already made up his mind about everything. I opened my mouth to stop him, to apologize, but I couldn't. "Liam, wait." But he was already out the door, the sound of it closing behind him leaving a hollow echo in the house. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, staring at the small wooden birds in my hands, the weight of my own words sinking in. I had no idea how I'd gotten here, how I could have so carelessly destroyed something that had once felt so precious. I put the sculpture down on the table and paced around the room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It was just a gift, right? A small gesture that didn't mean anything more than what it appeared to be. But why did it feel like I had just torn a rift in something so fragile, something we had worked so hard to build? I glanced at the clock. It had been 20 minutes since he left. He hadn't even looked back when he walked out, and now that I was alone, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my stomach. What had I done? There was no text, no call. Nothing. Just the cold, empty space where Liam used to be. I tried to reach for my phone, my fingers trembling slightly, but I didn't know what to say. How do you fix something that might already be broken beyond repair? The thought lingered in my mind like a fog I couldn't clear. After a while, I sat down on the couch, still holding my phone, and tried to distract myself. I scrolled through my social media, half-heartedly liking posts and reading headlines. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered. The house felt emptier with each passing minute, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just ruined the one thing that had ever felt real to me. Liam's absence weighed heavily on me, and all I could think about was how badly I had messed up. Was it just the gift? Was that really all it took? Or had there been something more, something beneath the surface that I hadn't been willing to see? I stood up again, pacing, unsure of what to do next. I wasn't even sure what I wanted anymore. I knew I needed to fix this, but I didn't know how. I could go after him, beg for his forgiveness, but what if it was too late? What if the damage was already done? The evening passed in a blur of indecision. I sent him a text, but he didn't respond. I left a voicemail. Nothing. I couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about him and the hurt I saw in his eyes, the same eyes that used to hold so much love for me. The house, which had always been a place of warmth, now felt like a cold, silent tomb. I knew I had crossed a line, but I didn't know how to come back from it. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the moment over and over. The look on his face. The silence after my words. And the realization that I might have just lost him for good. The days that followed felt like I was wading through quicksand. Each step I took seemed to sink me deeper into the mess I had made. Liam hadn't come home that night, and the silence between us only grew thicker. I tried to call him, to send texts, to reach out in any way I could, but each attempt was met with nothing. He was gone, and the worst part was that I knew I had pushed him there. Every time I heard his name in passing or saw something that reminded me of him, my heart ached. It wasn't just the gift, it was everything. The small things I had brushed off for months now felt like enormous cracks I had ignored. The late nights at work, the lack of real conversation between us, the way we had stopped truly seeing each other. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that he was gone, and I was left to face the wreckage of what had once been our life together. I spent the first few days in a haze. I cleaned the house, rearranged things that didn't need rearranging, trying to fill the space with something that wasn't the gnawing emptiness I felt inside. It was like I couldn't sit still. The quiet was suffocating. I couldn't concentrate on anything, and every moment I was alone was a constant reminder of how much I had messed up. I started to question everything. Was it the gift? Was it my reaction to it? No, it wasn't just the gift. It was everything leading up to that moment. I had been distant too. I hadn't been present in our relationship for a long time, and the gift was the catalyst that brought everything to the surface. I had turned it into something it wasn't, and now, it was too late to undo the damage. The phone stayed silent. The house remained empty. I spent hours sitting on the couch, staring at the messages I had sent him, wondering if I should text him again. But I couldn't bring myself to. Each message I drafted felt like a desperate attempt to fix something that couldn't be fixed with a few words. I had to face the fact that this wasn't something I could fix easily. I remember the first time I went to the grocery store after he left. The routine felt so normal, so ordinary, that it was almost unsettling. I walked through the aisles, picking up things for dinner, half thinking about how we used to do this together. It used to be something we did on autopilot, nothing special. But now, with him gone, every task felt like a reminder of the gap that had grown between us. The woman behind the counter asked me if I needed help with my groceries, and I nearly burst into tears. It was as if the simplest interaction had become too much for me to bear. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the empty space next to me, wondering if I would ever hear his voice again. I missed him in a way that felt impossible to articulate. It wasn't just the loss of him in the physical sense. It was the absence of everything we had built together, the way we used to laugh at the silliest things, the way he'd kiss me goodnight even after a long, exhausting day. But what was the point in missing him if I had been the one to push him away? The guilt gnawed at me constantly. Every thought was tainted by the reality that I had caused this. I thought about the way he had looked at me when I opened that gift. It hadn't just been a hurt look. It had been disappointment. He had tried to do something nice, something meaningful, and I had destroyed it with one careless comment. I had laughed at his effort when he was trying to show me he cared. How could I have been so cruel? The truth was, I had stopped appreciating him a long time ago. I had become so wrapped up in my own insecurities, my own need for validation, that I had stopped seeing him for who he was. He wasn't just my husband, he was a person who had feelings, who was trying to make me happy, even when I hadn't given him the same courtesy in return. I tried to think of what I could do to make things right. I couldn't change the past, but maybe there was a way to fix the future. I knew I needed to apologize, truly apologize, and not just say the words. I needed to show him that I understood how much I had hurt him, that I realized the extent of the damage. But even as I thought about it, I knew that apologizing might not be enough. Would it even matter anymore? It was late afternoon when I heard the knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second, I wondered if it was him. But when I opened it, I found my sister standing there, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Hey," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I didn't want to call, thought I'd just come by." I nodded, unable to muster the strength to pretend everything was fine. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. I didn't answer right away. What could I say? How could I explain the mess I had made? She could see it in my eyes, the guilt, the exhaustion, the overwhelming sense of regret. She knew me well enough to understand that something was wrong. "I screwed up," I said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "I hurt him, and I don't know how to fix it." She sighed, sitting down on the couch across from me. "What happened?" And that was when I told her everything, the gift, my reaction, and the days that had followed. I could feel the weight of the truth settle between us as I spoke, but it felt like a small relief to get it all out. My sister listened patiently, not interrupting, just letting me pour out everything I had been holding inside. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I can't fix it for you," she said finally. "But I think you need to really show him that you get it. That you understand what you did. That it wasn't just about the gift, it was about everything else. You need to be honest with him. And more importantly, you need to be honest with yourself." I nodded slowly, her words sinking in. It wasn't just about apologizing for what I'd said, it was about acknowledging the bigger picture, the years of neglect, the emotional distance I had created between us. I had to face all of it. "I don't know if he'll ever forgive me," I said quietly. She smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "You won't know unless you try." I nodded again, taking a deep breath. It was time to stop hiding from the consequences of my actions. It was time to face them head-on, no matter how much it hurt. The house was still empty when she left, and the silence was just as heavy as before. But now, there was something new in the air, an uneasy sense of resolve. I had a lot of work to do, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But if I wanted to fix what I had broken, I had no choice but to try. The house felt different when I woke up that morning. The silence wasn't as oppressive anymore, but there was still a heavy weight hanging over everything. It had been days since I'd seen Liam, and I couldn't deny it any longer, the distance between us was real. It wasn't just his absence, it was the emotional chasm that had opened up, one I had created without even realizing it. I had been so self-absorbed, so blind to the way I was treating him, that it had all spiraled out of control. I had tried to convince myself that if I gave him space, if I waited long enough, he would come around. But each passing day felt like a confirmation that I was wrong. I knew I needed to do something drastic. I couldn't just sit back and hope things would magically fix themselves. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was real life, and I had caused real damage. The idea came to me suddenly. I had to go to him. Not through a text, not through a phone call, but in person. I had to show him that I wasn't just sorry for what I had done, I had to prove that I understood why it mattered. I had to show him I was willing to fight for us, even if it meant facing the consequences of my actions head-on. I didn't know what to expect when I walked into that apartment. But when I arrived, the door was slightly ajar, and I took a deep breath before stepping inside. The place was dark, the blinds still closed as if no one had bothered to open them in days. Liam's absence was everywhere. His shoes were still by the door, his jacket thrown over the couch where he always left it. The world outside felt so distant, so out of reach, and it was just the two of us left in the space of unspoken tension. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. I wasn't even sure he was home. But then I heard a noise from the back room, the unmistakable sound of someone moving around. My heart began to race. Liam? I called softly, taking a few tentative steps forward. He appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, looking just as disheveled as the apartment. His hair was messy, and he hadn't bothered to change out of the clothes he'd been wearing when he left. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me, his face a mixture of exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite place. There was still that distance, that wall between us, and it stung to see it up close. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond immediately, and for a moment, I thought he might just walk away, like he had been doing for the past few days. But instead, he sighed, the weight of the situation clearly taking a toll on him. "I don't know what there is left to say," he muttered. "I know," I replied, swallowing the lump in my throat. "But I need to say it. I need to explain myself, Liam. I need you to understand why I reacted the way I did. And why I'm sorry." His eyes softened slightly, but the pain was still there, visible in the way he held himself. "You don't get it, do you?" he said quietly. "It wasn't just about the gift. It wasn't about the reaction. It was everything, Addie. Everything. The way we've been living for the last few months, the way we've been drifting apart. I don't know if I can keep pretending it's not happening." My heart twisted. This wasn't just about a stupid gift. It was about how I had neglected him, how I had let the small cracks in our relationship grow into a chasm. He was right. I had been so wrapped up in my own feelings, so caught up in my own world, that I hadn't seen the signs. I hadn't seen him slipping away until it was almost too late. "I'm sorry," I said again, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I know I've failed you. I know I've been distant and selfish. But I'm willing to change. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, to fix us." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. It was as if he was looking for any sign that I meant what I said. And maybe he was right to be cautious. I had said those words before, and they had meant nothing. But this time, I was different. I wasn't offering empty promises. I was offering the truth. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," he said softly, his voice breaking just a little. "I don't know if I can trust you again." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. But I understood. He had every right to feel that way. I had broken something that was so fragile, something I should have been protecting all along. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, I said. I don't expect everything to go back to the way it was. But I need you to know that I'm not giving up. I'm not walking away from us. I'm here, Liam. I'm here, and I'm ready to fight for this, for you. There was a long silence, and I could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. He was torn between the hurt and the love, between what he wanted and what he knew he needed. I had pushed him to the edge, and now it was up to me to show him that I wasn't going to let go so easily. Finally, he stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I need time, he said, his voice low and steady. I can't just forget what happened. But maybe we can try. We can try to rebuild, if you're really willing to put in the work. A weight lifted off my shoulders, but it wasn't a solution. It was just the beginning. We had a long road ahead of us, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in days, I felt like there was hope. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect, but it was a promise that we were both willing to try. I'm willing, I said, my voice firm this time. I'll do whatever it takes. He nodded, though there was still a trace of sadness in his eyes. We'll see. And with that, the conversation ended. He didn't say anything else, but the tension in the room had shifted. The wall between us wasn't gone, but it had started to crumble. It was the first real step towards something that could be salvaged. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to hope again. As I left his apartment that evening, I knew we had a long way to go. There would be setbacks, hard days, and difficult conversations ahead. But we had taken the first step. And for now, that was enough.